The Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity released a very important report that shows that in the Latin America we have $14 trillion in terms of ecosystem services driven by especially the Amazonian forest. So it's a huge input of capital to the economy, especially to the agribusiness, that of course can change dramatically and quickly if you don't really actually fast.
What happened between 88 and 2014 with all the areas that were clear-cut during this period? And they find out that 63% of those areas that were clear-cut now are low productivity pasture. And 23% was abandoned and is in regeneration. So it's basically why we actually clear and cut forests.
When we look at the economy of this model, it really does not make any sense economically. Cattle productivity, also mentioned yesterday, very low. Most of the timber is illegally logged. Average productivity of soy is very low in the Amazon. 20 years ago, acai was a local product with perhaps $50 million economy. Today, acai, there are more than 35 different products made of acai. It's a global industry. Profitability, look at this number, from $200 to over $1,500 a year per hectare. Much, much larger than anything that replaces the forest.
The Amazon could be the ideal laboratory for the development of ecosystem science. I think that ecosystem studies and the understanding of ecosystems is going to be the next big thing.
We can bring modern technologies to the field, to the forest, to small communities, and capacitate these communities to produce high-end values, final products with a lot of added value.
There are several opportunities to innovate in terms of models, but also social and environment technologies that can be replicable from one project to the other with enough cost efficiency base. Also to discover new value chains in the Amazon region. We were talking about processing oils, acai berries, cassava flour, ecotourism, handcrafts, fishery, sustainable timber production, and also many other extractive activities.
The room for bioeconomy, it's open. We agree that that's the way to go, but we need a social agreement before. We need to work between local communities and our political institutions and international organizations to really get a common view, a shared view of what has to be done in the Amazon to prevent forest destruction.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Defining a Third Way for the Amazon, presented by the Brazil Office and Brazil Studies Program of the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies, as part of the 24 Hours at Harvard and the Harvard Worldwide Week. My name is Bruno Carvalho. I'm a professor of Romance, Languages, and Literatures and African American Studies, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Marcia Castro, the Andelot Professor of Demography and Chair of the Department of Global Health and Population in the School of Public Health. With our colleague Fran Hagopian, we are co-chairs of the Brazil Studies Program. The short video just shown comes from a conference that we organized here at Harvard last year, where we convened scientists, indigenous leaders, religious authorities, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and journalists from several countries to discuss the past, present, and future of the region, and how, in the Amazon, the very future of our planet is in so many ways at stake. Links to video recordings of that conference will be shared in the chat. At the time, as you saw in the video, we were fortunate to host our featured speaker for today, the renowned climate scientist and proponent of the Amazon 4.0 initiative, Professor Carlos Nobre. We are again fortunate to have him with us today. Currently, Professor Nobre is a senior scientist at the University of São Paulo's Institute for Advanced Studies and a senior fellow at the World Resources Institute. You can learn more about his multiple awards, accolades, and contributions in this event's website. We are also thrilled to have Vinicius Furuie with us as discussant. He recently received a PhD in anthropology from Princeton University with a dissertation based on 20 months of field work with river traders of the Xingu Basin in the eastern Brazilian Amazon. And he is currently a fellow at the Harvard University Center for the Environment. Following their presentations, we will take questions from the audience. We encourage you to submit questions in the chat function throughout the session. We will try to address as many of them as possible in the Q&A. Please remember that today's event is being recorded, will be made available with subtitles in Portuguese for audiences in Brazil. But before hearing from our speakers, let us turn it over to Marcia Castro, herself an Amazon specialist, for some opening thoughts.
Thank you, Bruno. So let me give you a little bit of context about what we're going to discuss in a minute. The future of the Amazon rainforest is uncertain. This year, the Amazon recorded the worst fires in a decade, with 61% more fires this past month of September compared to the same month last year. Deforestation has reached the highest rates since 2008. Extreme climatic events, such as the drought we observed this year, are becoming more frequent and more intense. Recent models suggest that in a matter of decades, about 40% of the Amazon forest could shift from a rainforest to a savanna. Such a scenario would have devastating consequences to the region, to Brazil, to the continent, to the world. Is it possible to limit the damage to the Amazon forest while still harnessing its incredible economic potential? That is the question we will address on this panel, and no one better than Carlos Nobre to reflect on that. Carlos, we're delighted to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marcia and Bruno. Let me share the screen with you. Are you seeing the screen?
Yes.
Okay. I will really tell you about what's going on in the Amazon, and to tell you a little bit more what we might need to do, whether there are alternatives. So let's call it, because of post-pandemic, everyone is talking about the Green New Deal, the European New Deal. Let's talk about Amazon Green Deal and how to transform the Amazon into a power of social biodiversity. Let me just start very briefly saying the Amazon was before seen as green hell, but of course the people, 12,000 years of indigenous people, it's a green paradise for them. And but also when we look at what the Amazon means for the planet, global carbon cycle, it removes a lot of carbon, powerful hydrology, 15% of the fresh water into the oceans, something like 15% of the global biodiversity, very important for climate stabilization, and of course helps maintain indigenous linguistic and ethnic diversity. So this is the Amazon. In fact, science can conclude very clearly the Amazon is a green paradise, not only for the indigenous population, but also for the planet. 1 hectare of tropical forest in the Amazon, primary forest, 1 hectare, 10,000 square kilometers, a football pitch, holds more angiosperms, trees with flowers, than the whole European continent. Just to give you an idea about that richness. The Amazon forest only exists because the forest exists. So these key evolutionary accomplishments, very efficient recycling of water, the forest recycles water, and the tremendously efficient recycling of nutrients. The soils are very poor, leached, millions of years of leaching, and the plants, the microfauna recycle all that. However, we've been going through deforestation and fires for 50 years in the Amazon. So, in fact, 30 years ago, I posed this question, the risks of savanization, a paper published in Journal of Climate and also in Science, in which basically at that time I just made with a climate model this area on the right-hand side with blue that was going to become a savanna if we deforest the Amazon. So today we know, as Marcia already mentioned, in the last 20 years, we are seeing two strong droughts, 2005, 2010, per decade. Before was every 20, 25 years. And also deforestation is 15, 16% increasing very much, particularly in southern Amazon. And also Amazon is becoming an inferno of biomass, burning, fires out of control. So a number of studies, and I put here just a summary, show very clearly that when we switch from forest to grassland, pasture land, we have many differences in the forest atmosphere interactions. The evapotranspiration in the forest make it cooler, 1 to 2.5 up to 3 degrees. Rougher surface makes for a stronger turbulent exchange of CO2, of air, of humid air, of water vapor, and the forest transpires year-round, including in the dry season. It transpires more in the dry season than in the wet season, and that's the opposite of a grassland. So overall, the Amazon is much wetter. It rains more, and we are seeing a lot of changes in these areas of great deforestation. Also, this is the local impact of deforestation. Then we are seeing global warming bringing a very worrying global effect, which is the Gulf Stream in the Atlantic Ocean is weaker. So it's holding heat in the tropical North Atlantic, which is becoming warmer. For instance, this year, very warm, very, very likely strong hurricane season as well. But also that causes drought in southern, eastern Amazon. So global warming, climate scenarios in the future also indicated a much hotter and drier Amazon. So that's really leading in, and also I've been doing a lot of work on that. And our studies show this risk of 60 up to 70% of the Amazon becoming a degraded savanna. Mostly the forest will remain near the Andes. And why we are so concerned? It's not only a model calculation. That's really, we are seeing the extreme climate events, droughts and floods more frequent. The dry season in southern Amazon is already 3 to 4 weeks longer compared to the 1980s, especially over the forest areas. The outset of the rainy season, the onset of the wet season is becoming end of October. So this is very worrying because it's getting very close to this savanization point. Forests in southern Amazon are showing reduced water cycling. Forests are removing less carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Mortality rates of wet climate species are increasing in that area. And a recent paper also observed savanization of fauna, more species. So those are two papers published. The one this week, the hysteresis of tropical forest. They calculate up to 40% might become a savanna. In my calculations, this is more like 60% if we keep global warming. And also this savanization of the fauna. So that's why we say a potential tipping point if deforestation exceeds 20-25% and global warming continues unabated. And so can we avoid the Amazon tipping point? Is there a possibility? So this is a difficult question, but certainly we have really to operate in both ways. We have to make sure that we reach globally the Paris Agreement goals, not warming the planet more than 2 degrees, ideally 1.5 degrees, but also we have to reduce deforestation to 0 and restore large areas of the tropical forest. So this topic and the topic scenarios, this is in our hands, particularly with respect to the Amazon. So is it possible a zero deforestation economic development model in the Amazon? Let's briefly review the 2 land use models in the Amazon for many decades. We call it first way. This is the emphasis on protected areas, indigenous lands, conservation units. And a lot of people in many Amazonian countries, particularly in Brazil, are saying these are obstacles to real economic development. I mean, is this true? We see 47% of the Amazon is legally protected, indigenous territories and protected areas, the largest protected tropical forest in the planet. And the second way, the common way in the last 50 years, since the 1970s, is really resource-intensive development based on commodities, minerals, beef industry, grains, and the question, is it necessary to get rid of the forest, as this model has promoted and continue to be promoting? So we have here deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon, which reached 20% this year, and it's mostly in eastern and southern Amazon, the area very close to a savanization. So the question is, if we increase sustainable intensification of agriculture, is this sufficient? No, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. We have really to look at what else, and the solution space really calls for forest restoration and standing forest bioeconomy. So that's the proposal for the Amazon third way. It's a new idea, very disruptive, basically to transformative change in social ecological systems in the desired directions. This is the great acceleration of disruptive solutions, the same way we need for renewable energy, for other elements for combating climate crisis and also protecting biodiversity. So what's the potential of this new way for many industries, the potential of biodiversity? So this is the idea of the Amazonia 4.0 project, the Amazon Third Way. It's a novel sustainable development paradigm for the Amazon, for the Amazonian people, for the forest, rivers, and also for the rest of us. Protecting the Amazon is a big protection for all of us, for the planet and for the life in the planet. So basically the idea here is how to bring the modern technology of the fourth industrial revolution, the new paradigm of this 21st century, the knowledge society, and harness the biological biomimetic immense potential of the Amazon. This is just one of many studies showing 450 species of potential use in the Amazon. Let me just make very briefly just a comparison. One might ask the question, I mean, can we know this for sure? I mean, is this an economy that we call a standing forest economy, be competitive with grains, with meat? So let's compare acai, Brazil nuts, and cocoa with cattle and soy. This is the IBGE, the Brazil Census Bureau analysis 2017 agricultural census. And I just want to show here meat and soy. This is the area they use in reais, 14.5 billion a year, and the acai berry, cocoa, and Brazil nuts, 7.4 billion using less than 4,000 square kilometers. So that shows much, much higher productivity existing. This is real data. So therefore, agroecological systems manage to supply this material has a tremendous potential. Agroecological systems maintain 56% of biodiversity, 60 to 80% of carbon. So let me give you very briefly a few examples, illustration of this potential. First, forest products ready for the market. Of course, acai berry is the greatest example, largest increase in production from 1985 to the present. They raise over $1 billion for the Amazon economy a year, benefit 300,000 people in over several products, and also the production of acai brings much better well-being to the Amazon populations. Specialized molecules, for instance, terpene, which is a very famous element for this perfume, famous perfume. Also, the genes, this gene from a microbial from an Amazon lake is being used to convert cellulose into sugar, increasing 50% bioethanol production. And of course, the co-evolution of pirarucu and the piranha made the pirarucu produce this very protective element, and this has been used to make a bulletproof vest, which is very, very quality, high quality, and very inexpensive, just biomimetic. So how difficult is to add value to biodiversity in the remote interior? So of course we have to think of a model that's decentralized, that really there is all these communities, over 6,000 in all of the Amazon basin, over 4,000 Brazilian Amazon. So of course this is a big challenge, but the modern technology of fourth industrial revolution allow for us to tackle this challenge, the isolation, how to bring infrastructure, green infrastructure, how to train people in the Amazon to produce high quality products. So let me then tell you a little bit of two elements that we are already implementing. We are not only doing a conceptual development, we want to bring these ideas to the Amazon, to the heart of the Amazon. One is Amazon Creative Labs, and the second one is Rainforest Business School. Amazon Creative Labs is a key element of this capacity development strategy. Basically, they are mobile, portable labs that will be taken to train communities and also for developing the fusion of traditional scientific knowledge, co-design and co-production of knowledge. We are already producing several of these. Cocoa Cupuaçu, we are building this one under construction, and we have designs for Brazil nuts, for genomics, tremendous potential. It's a lab for genomics, including the leader of this genomics lab, your former student, Bruno de Medeiros. He's leading this effort. Also for cooking oils, gourmet cooking oils, and for acai. So we are already constructing this one for Cupuaçu Cocoa. It's a modern biofabric for very high level production of products like chocolates. And this will be taken to many communities. So WIN Association, producers of Cupuaçu, slave descendants, Quilombo, also riverine communities, another riverine community near Santarém, and also in November, December, we're going to bring this lab to train students, university students in Manaus. So this is ongoing project. And also the Rainforest Business School, we are developing this. It's a partnership between University of São Paulo's Institute of Advanced Studies and the University of Amazonas State. So this is a modern concept, how to develop a business school for business of standing forests, promoting sustainability, promoting assessments of risk, producing a new pedagogical material very appropriate to train students, undergraduate, graduate students for this new economic model, a new bioeconomy for the Amazon. So I'm getting to the end. Let me just finish with some reflections here. Looking ahead, what's the real advantage of a biodiversity-rich countries, such as all Amazonian countries, in the concert of nations? I think this is an important question Amazonian countries have to pose. And can we really be happy, Amazonian countries, just remaining forever providers of commodities to develop industrialized nations? I mean, are we really, that's the way to develop? And I think, the answer is no. We are never going to be developed countries if we really do not move to a very different development model. How Amazonian countries can emerge as global leaders, and global leaders of what? By implementing a biodiversity-driven bioeconomy. Decentralized bioindustrialization can generate much more social inclusiveness, higher income, because of adding value to these forest products, immense, because we know a few, we make use of a very few. The potential is infinite. New process, new knowledge, genetic resources, all the biomimetic learning from the trillions of interactions among species. So that can spearhead the development of this innovative 21st century tropical bioeconomy. Does not exist anywhere. So we have to create. The focus that has to focus on health conservation for the earth, in line with a global society in search of sustainable solutions to environmental and health crises. Of course, we have also to consider the risks of new pandemics coming from the perturbation of tropical rainforests, including the Amazon. And of course, this is solely based on science, technology, but also on traditional knowledge. So basically, Amazon Green Deal, how to transform the Amazon into an environmental power of the social biodiversity. And I think, really it's the fusion of idealism and the realism, but also plus innovation, science, technology, and innovation. This is what is our goal, our challenge, and the soul-searching answers to a sustainable Amazon. Knowledge, traditional and scientific knowledge as the basis of this new sustainable development model. And again, tropical forest only exists because the forest exists. Late geographer Berta Becker, she created this idea to add value to the heart of the forest. Yanomami indigenous leader, last year in May at Harvard, he said this very beautiful sentence, saving the heart of Mother Earth. So basically, what we need is science, technology, and traditional knowledge to offer solutions for this new standing forest, flowing rivers bioeconomy, creating local bioindustries, along with empowerment and quality, inclusive education for all the Amazonian people. So this is our big challenge. Amazonian countries have to really endure to take this challenge, but of course we need global cooperation. We need a strong cooperation interest by the scientific community in the world, the students, young students, to be very interested in coming in, entering this challenge and helping us to win. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Hi. Okay. Thank you, Professor Carlos Nobre. Let me begin by saying that it's truly an honor to add a small contribution to a conversation with such an esteemed scholar. And I'd also like to thank everyone who organized the event and for the invitation to be here. So I will pick up on this fascinating proposal of building a new economy in the Amazon based on information technology from a local perspective. The riverside dwellers of Amazonian rivers, who I have the privilege to work with, They are living through many of the changes in climate that we're talking about, and they know that the rains are fewer and temperatures higher because they remember how the weather was different when they were younger. So to them, climate change is real. This local perspective agrees with science, even though they use different methods, and it's an important knowledge that can contribute to how we understand our transforming world. I'm saying this to further Dr. Nobre's point about conciliating traditional and scientific knowledge. So having said that, to me, one of the most remarkable aspects of Nobre's proposal is that it suggests a new organization of Amazonian economy that builds on the mistakes and lessons of previous versions. He shows that observing nature is the main way humans learn. However, his work also shows that we don't have much margin for error left in terms of time. So I understand his argument in the following way. Science and history must converge in Amazonia so that we avoid repeating past mistakes at a moment when stakes are very high. So before we go into Amazonia 4.0 and the fourth industrial revolution, I want to look back to the second industrial revolution. The technological innovations of the late 19th century, such as automobiles and airplanes, they created an international market for an old Amazonian technology, the latex that indigenous people extracted from rubber trees. So factories in Europe, Japan, and the US needed tires, tubes, and belts, and the Amazon basin was the only place they could source rubber. The rubber boom, as it came to be known, was a period during which commodity markets expanded throughout most of the Amazonian basin, reaching further than ever before. And rubber tappers flocked from all over Brazil to harvest latex. This was probably the most radical social transformation to happen in the Amazon in the span of just 4 decades. Perhaps we can think of that period as Amazonia 2.0. So the radical changes of that period integrated Amazonia to the international commodity market, an event that had 2 main consequences for the region. The first was that there was a lot of violence all around, especially against indigenous people and migrant laborers. And the second one was that river trade and a seasonal credit system came to organize the distribution of supplies and the extraction of rubber all over the Amazon basin. This credit system, that's locally known as aviamento, became the backbone of the Amazonian riverside society. In its inception, this system was violent, and the workers were exploited by the rich and powerful owners of rubber estates. But over the decades, it became a network of relations based on trust. Riverside dwellers and river traders all over the basin became mutually dependent, and their mechanisms of trust are based on a shared ethics, practices, and vocabularies. Without these ties, it would be impossible to exchange across the vast distances and riverine cycles that are typical of the region. So we have this arrangement to thank for the survival of much of the Amazon forest that is still standing. The descendants of rubber tappers have an intimate knowledge of the forest and rivers, and their economic activity have little impact on biodiversity, with some recent studies suggesting that they might enhance it. The Ribeirinhos, as many call themselves, heroically fought against loggers and land grabbers, and some of them, like Chico Mendes, died defending the forest they live in. So Amazonia 4.0 proposes to valorize these valuable connections. To valorize them, as Dr. Nobre made clear, means to place the indigenous and traditional populations of the Amazon in the position of protagonist, and the rest of us as aids to facilitate their access to technology, capital, and markets. This is a very important move. It is more than ever necessary to abandon the well-intending but harmful illusion that outsiders need to go to the Amazon to teach the locals how to build a better economy. They already have one. It just needs more and better support in terms of capital and technology. Unfortunately, for the most part, economic development projects in the region have gone against the grain of local economy. Large-scale development projects such as the Belo Monte Dam built in the Xingu over the last decade destroyed the social ties of riverside communities by devastating their land, flooding the river, and displacing them to poor peripheries of major cities. So to finish my commentary on this remarkable presentation, I want to take a step back and reflect on what the economy means. What do we mean when we say that we need a new economic paradigm? Some people say that the economy is about allocating resources efficiently. Others say it's about how people and institutions make decisions. Although they are very important concerns, from the point of view of small communities in the riverbanks of Amazonia, the most interesting aspect about what we call the economy is that it depends on trust. This is, of course, true to the economy in general. Just think about how the stock market behaves when investors lose trust in the government. And interestingly, it is economic interactions that produce trust. Think about your credit score, for example. Although we chiefly associate the economy to the production of material things, it is actually mostly about making social relations. In other words, a strong economy produces robust social ties for any economy to function. So to conclude, I'd like to say that Amazonia 4.0 is a very inspiring proposal that moves away from a type of development that destroys wealth. We must stop destroying the wealth of biodiversity, of water resources, of local knowledge, and of community trust. Amazonia 4.0 proposes a way to move forward by strengthening local Amazonian social ties. That is, by building on top of the legacy that the second industrial revolution left in the Amazon. Differently, though, from the 19th century, the goal this time is to support the indigenous and traditional communities. Hopefully, with capital and technology, we can help them to continue taking care of Amazonia. Thank you, and I will pass the word back to Bruno and Marcia.
Thank you so much, Vinicius, and thanks again, Dr. Nobre, for a fabulous presentation. So first, before we ask, we have a few questions. I just want to ask, Carlos, would you like to say a few words to Vinicius based on his comments?
Well, I just want to say I'm very satisfied to see in-depth analysis by Vinicius representing really, you know, the thinking and the necessary solutions for empowering traditional communities, particularly indigenous communities, riverine communities. So I'm very glad to see emerging these initiatives. So congratulations, and certainly let's work together. Let's put, you know, Amazonia 4.0 together with this empowerment of the traditional populations.
Great. So our first question comes from Felipe Storch. And his question is, how would the Rainforest Business School work? And how could institutions like Harvard support this initiative?
Thank you very much, Felipe. Yes, of course, we are initiating the development. Now we are starting to develop an online platform, and any contribution by anybody from Harvard, from anywhere, and we have some means to translate from English to Portuguese and Spanish. The idea, medium-term idea, is to have the school in 3 languages, Spanish, English, and Portuguese. So any contribution, anybody from, not necessarily only economists, but any issue, for instance, ecosystem services, anything, entrepreneurship, science and technology. So anybody that can contribute to helping the school, the Rainforest Business School, in the sense of, you know, giving the proper background to an undergrad and graduate students. And also, this is an online platform, so we hope really having trilingual to be all-inclusive, from not only from the Amazonian countries, but also to start attracting interest from any young people in the world, anybody who wants to come to the Amazon and supports this type of development. Also, Vinicius gave a very emphatic reasoning about we would like really the challenge of preserving the Amazon forest, biodiversity, indigenous population, not to be only for Amazonian countries, to be a global effort, the same way fighting climate change crisis is a global effort. So yes, we welcome very much any contribution to the Rainforest Business School platform.
That's great. Health as well, right?
Health, of course, Marcia, health as well.
Bruno.
First, thank you so much, Carlos and Vinicius. This has been really great. We received a question from Washington Fajardo about the role of cities in Amazon 4.0. So over 30 million people living in the Amazonian basin, many of them in urbanized conditions. So Washington wants to know how we can connect the historical wisdom of past urban planning to future ecological metropolitan scenarios, which he then rephrases as a question of whether it wouldn't be more efficient if the urban economies of Amazonian cities were involved in building Amazon 4.0.
You want me to address that?
Yeah, this was one of the questions we received.
Yeah, of course, 70% of the Amazonian population is urban. So this new development model has necessarily to become both rural and urban. And that's why, for instance, the Rainforest Business School, it's being headquartered in the University of Amazonas State in Manaus, really to start motivating the city of Manaus to develop green industries for this new bioeconomy. No questions, this is very important element. And also, not only the big cities, Manaus, Belém, but also the small cities, because what we see in all of the Amazon basin is people, teenagers from small villages, small towns, living and going and becoming very poor, living in slums in the big cities. So we have really to create a model that there are all scales of bio-industries, small scale in communities, in small towns, fixing those people, the riverine populations, and finding, of course, modern Industry 4.0 infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, fluvial transport infrastructure for transports, solar energy powered transportation. So we have to face this challenge. But yes, this new industrialization is very important that also be extended to the cities, including big cities. But we want to show that it's possible to have value adding at communities, small towns, villages, because it's very important to maintain these populations, to protect and preserve the forest.
Great. We have a question now from Tiago Genovese. And the question is, how have American populations, primarily indigenous communities, reacted to the proposal of Amazonia 4.0? Have they been consulted and involved in the design of the initiative?
We've been consulting. In particular, I spoke with a number of indigenous leaders. In particular, for instance, Dave Kopenawa in Harvard, when I met him for the first time. And so I had an opportunity to talk to 7 indigenous leaders from very important indigenous groups like Yanomami, Ashaninka, Furuie, Baniwa. And of course, this is a small sample. But what I heard from these indigenous leaders, they all welcome. Indigenous leaders have been trying with very little rate of success also to develop schools in the Amazon to put together in traditional knowledge and our knowledge. They've been doing that, trying that for years and years with very little success. So at least these 7 indigenous leaders that I spoke with, they welcome very much the capacity development. They are very open to new technologies. At least, I mean, of course, there are perhaps 35 isolated indigenous groups in Brazilian Amazon. So we have to respect them. They want to be isolated. But by and large, there is something like close to 900,000 indigenous people in all of Brazil, 650,000 in the Amazon. So they, at least most of them, are open because they start seeing that adding value to the products of the forest will improve their living standards, their well-being. They see that. They see that. For instance, Yanomami indigenous groups are producing a very special type of mushroom, which is already being sold in parts. The Baniwa indigenous group produces a fantastic hot pepper that exists only in there, from a plant that exists endemic in their territories. So they are starting seeing the benefits of producing more value out of the forest, and they see that as a benefit. Furuie indigenous groups in Rondônia also are starting to industrialize Brazil nuts. So there is no point. I mean, if they accept, they don't see a contradiction. At least those 7 indigenous leaders I spoke with, they don't see a contradiction between their cultural values, their spiritual values, the cultural value of protecting the forest and bringing in modern technologies to support that protection. So that, at least my assessment, it's not a full-fledged scientific assessment, but also I spoke with organizations like Instituto Socioambiental, ISA, and they are also welcome. That they told me, Beto Ricardo, the leader of ISA, told me that that's the way to go. We have really to empower indigenous communities, those communities who want to do it with modern technology. The Ashaninka leaders, Francisco Ashaninka, is crazy about bringing the genomics lab to their village. He wants the young indigenous people there to learn how to do a sequencing of genome of plants, animal, and also microorganisms, of course, because of the pandemic, we have to learn more about that. So this, again, this is not a scientific assessment, but this initial consultation I carried out gave me a lot of optimism that most of the indigenous leaders welcome being powered by modern technologies.
Great. So, Vinicius.
Sorry, I wanted to have made an intervention before, but my phone, my microphone wasn't mute. But I wanted to go back to that point before about cities in Amazonia. One more thing that I wanted to ask about, I wanted to add about the question of efficiency in cities in the Amazon, is that there's a particularity to urbanization in the Amazon. That although 70% of the people there do live in urban areas, it is really common in the region that people will live part of the year in the cities and then another part of the year where they were born by the riverside. So in other words, it's a different type of urbanization. It's a mobile form of residence that we have to think about. So adding that to the economic equation means that we have to think about following where the people are. So it's not just about providing the infrastructure in the cities. It won't do any good if people leave there and spend like when the Brazil nut tree harvest time comes in or when the rubber harvest comes in, they will move back to their original places. So we have to follow that potential in order to design a better economic model for this specific time of urbanization. So sorry to disrupt the flow, but I just wanted to add that.
No, that's a very important point. Yeah, and the peoples Vinicius are speaking about often don't are legally encompassed by the term indigenous in Brazilian contexts. So yeah, no, that's very important. So those of you at home might have seen in the link an article that Carlos and I wrote as an op-ed for the New York Times, which was published as part of this wonderful feature, "The Amazon Has Seen Our Future," and it outlines a lot of the topics we've covered today. So, Carlos, a friend of mine texted me, this seems so attainable and reasonable. What's keeping it from happening? Needless to say, this is a friend who does not follow current politics in Brazil. So the question is about what's needed at the policy level. I like the appeal to the New Deal as a precedent. So what's necessary for this vision to be fulfilled in terms of policy and politics? This connects to a question just submitted by Thelma Viali, who introduces the international dimension. How to tackle the alignment of global agreements and regional mechanisms and federal and state policies. So if you could address.
Well, I'm becoming much more optimist, even considering certain political positions by many Amazonian countries, particularly Brazil, Bolivia, Peru. We have, for instance, on the contrary, we have Colombia as a country where the president really supports fully this type of development, standing first by economy. The Colombian government is already funding research on genomics, on genetic resources. So we can see good news. Brazilian states in the Amazon, Pará state, Amapá state, also the political leadership fully supports this new type of economy. And also we started to see a major discussion in the federal government in Brazil. The economy ministry, they are already talking about that. So we start seeing that the traditional economic sectors, they are starting to see, because as I mentioned, I showed the data about acai, etc. It's obvious. The potential is gigantic economically. So I'm becoming a little bit more optimistic about that. And I see that we are going really not to go back. I think we are going to move ahead.
Okay, so we have a question from Tim Linden. And he's wondering how other sectors of society, so not just the government, but the industry, the civil society, are reacting to the proposal. And recently, Brazilian banks announced an alliance in support of the Amazon. Is this a positive sign?
There is a very positive sign that all emerged out of the global outcry that starts last August 2019. It's a global outcry against destroying the Amazon. So, that really starts making the private sector, the investment funds, they came 3 months ago, hand deliver a letter to the Vice President of Brazil saying, we are going to disinvest from Brazil if deforestation continues very high. And the private sector now, the Brazilian private sector, the private banks in Brazil created the Council for the Amazon. Meat companies create Council for the Amazon. Traceability systems to make sure that the meat does not come from illegally deforested areas. So this is new. That's why this also, I should have said before, raises a little bit more optimism. We are starting to see the business sector very concerned because the science has demonstrated it's possible to develop the Amazon with zero deforestation. Indigenous populations have been doing that for 12,000 years. There is, quote unquote, indigenous technologies improving fertility, the dark earth of indigenous communities, and a number of other technologies, the indigenous people. And now modern technologies, we also are showing that. So therefore, that's why I think, we are in a moment really to launch these initiatives, not only Amazonia 4.0 initiative, but globally speaking, investment funds, private sector, business to come to the Amazon and support this development. I'm very optimistic that we are not going to go back.
So I think that's great. And I think it's even better that we can end this panel on a very optimistic note, really hoping for the best. On the one hand, it said that we need that level of destruction for science to play a role and people to start believing the importance, but let's hold on the optimist and hope Amazon 4.0 becomes really an example of what to do. And maybe 1 year from now, we're going to be here discussing all the success of the initiative. Bruno.
Well, I think our time is up in just a few seconds. So I just want to again thank all of you for listening, and especially Carlos Nobre and Vinicius Furuie. There couldn't be a more urgent, timely, and promising conversation for us to have. It is over for now, but it will, of course, continue into whatever futures we must shape, because business as usual is not viable.
Thank you all. And
thank you all.
Engage in the topic. It's important.
Mm-hmm.